Okay, so Molly the magpie looks like it's about to get taken again from the people that took it from the wild. So let's just have a quick recap. A few years ago, a couple took a young baby magpie out of the wild and brought it up themselves. They weren't wildlife carers. They didn't know what to do. They didn't bring it up in a way which enabled it to function independently or to be released into the wild. And they marketed the hell out of it through social media. It became hugely popular. There was a GoFundMe set up on their behalf, which raised a couple of $100,000. And the bird was taken from them by the government just prior to the state election. Stephen Miles, the then Queensland Premier, got it returned, and frankly that was just nothing more than an election stunt. And anyway, so now there's been a court hearing in which some real wildlife carers have appealed the fact that it was returned to them because these people didn't have a license, they weren't trained, and they shouldn't have the bird. And so I've just read that that court case was successful, so I presume the next move now is for the bird to get taken from these people again. And look, this case is a great example of not letting, or it should be a good example of not letting your emotions affect some more logical thinking. Now, this case really tugged on the heartstrings. The bird formed a bond with a dog that these people had, and that was extremely popular on social media. They even fed the bird some of the dog's milk at one stage, which is completely wrong to do. But anyway, so look, it was like a feel-good, heartwarming story in the middle of COVID. And they were even pushing it as, if these two species can get along, why can't humans get along? Apart from the fact that the whole thing was just completely wrong. I mean, that's not the way to bring up an animal. It's that they didn't have that animal's best interests at heart, and they were just kind of playing on people's emotions. And anyway, so the point I want to make is that, and I've done this myself heaps, I'm a very emotional person, and quite often I've made the mistake of thinking with my emotions first. Sometimes, obviously you need to have emotion in there as well to balance out the logical side, but you also have to apply your logic to a situation as well. And so, obviously, you know, if people see the magpie with these two people and they think, oh, it's so nice and it can come and go as it likes, none of that is a good situation. And the reason is, that bird can't live independently. It wasn't raised. It's stunted in its behavioural growth. It may have physical abnormalities as well, but it needs to keep coming back to them. It can't actually, saying it can just come and go as it likes is not good enough, because it should be able to live independently, and it can't. And it wasn't raised to be able to do that. And also there's been heaps of copycats where people have been catching magpies, cutting their wings, and trying to mix them with their own dogs and start their own, you know, social media following, you know, by doing the same thing. And anyway, you've got to think logically as well as, you know, compassionately. And when you think logically about this, just consider this, okay? The bird doesn't know how to survive independently. Whether or not it can just fly around in and out of their house is beside the point. It's not actually living independently. It wasn't raised to be able to do that, so it wasn't raised properly to begin with. It shouldn't be you know, mixing in close proximity to dogs, because, you know, eventually it'll probably get killed by a dog out in the wild because it won't understand the difference. And the example that these people have set is appalling, and the fact that they just took this animal illegally out of the wild and then monetized it through all of this merchandise that they were selling online and a GoFundMe that was set up for them, that is not what wildlife carers do. This is just completely wrong. And so, you know, you've got all of that, and in particular the copycat examples is like, if they just let this go through, you know, that just tells anyone they can go and do a similar thing. It's absolutely appalling. So you've got to think about all of that stuff, as well as, oh, isn't it cute, and, you know, nice seeing it with the dog and everything. Okay, you've got to balance the emotions, the emotional response you may have with more of a pragmatic, logical response. And this is why we have rules and laws, because it helps steer us clear of the shortcomings of our emotions. There's lots of strengths in having an emotional response, but you've also got to realize there are lots of weaknesses and dangers to it as well, and you've got to balance that with a long-sighted view in terms of the the dangers, and just think more logically and pragmatically, what are the effects of this if I just go with my emotions. And so I hope that that bird gets taken from them. I hope it never gets returned to them. It should be placed in some wildlife park somewhere and no one even know the identity of it, and just live out the rest of its days there. And I also just want to say to people, when you read comments online, a lot of people are saying, oh, this is just the wokies, and this is an example for wokeism, and what's wrong with the world, and all of this kind of stuff. And I think, look, there's two things going on there. It's people using the term woke or do-gooders as a pejorative phrase, just to try and dismiss something because they're not actually digging deeper and thinking about what the real issues are. And I also think that there's a lot of people who just have a gripe with the government for whatever. It could be their tax, or it could be because they don't like the way the road was built near their house or something. Anyway, people who have some kind of gripe with the government just identify with this, and again, they they'll defend these two people that took this bird from the wild just because the government's now having a go at them. Whereas, if they didn't like the government having a go at themselves, they'll identify with these two people. And anyway, look, all I'm saying is balance your emotions with long-term critical thinking, okay? And this is why we have rules and laws. And these two people broke the law. They did a terrible thing for this bird. It should have been left in the wild. And I also want to say that there's a lot of times, and it's really good, people will ask me or they'll ask, well, I'm not a wildlife carer, I'm an ornithologist, but they will ask wildlife carers, what should I do? There's a little bird here. Its parents are in the tree next to it and it's struggling on the ground. And a lot of times, this is just birds that are fledgling. They're coming out of the nest, they're struggling to fly or to get round to begin with. But that's just part of life. You have to leave them, and it is survival of the fittest. If you don't like it, that's just life. If they're not good enough to survive at that stage, then they get weeded out of the gene pool. And I know that sounds mean and horrible, but that is how life works. And, you've got to realise a lot of birds will, chicks will kill other chicks, or other birds will come and predate on those chicks. It is a very mean, tough world out there in the wildlife, the wild world. And you need the survival of the fittest so things can compete and survive. And if you see a little bird like that, unless if it's injured or being attacked, if it's injured, take it to a vet, right? Fine, and then they can go to a proper wildlife carer and get released properly, trained to be independently released. But don't just pick it up and take it like these people did with this magpie. Just leave them, let nature take its course. Unless there's an injury or an attack going on, just leave it and just let nature take its course. So that's all I want to say here. Hopefully that magpie gets taken from them. We never hear from those people again, or no one copies what they did, and we never hear about that magpie again. And just think about balancing your own emotional, knee-jerk reaction. And, I do that as well. We're all human. But balance that against a bit more of a long-term pragmatic thinking. And, don't just say, oh, this is woke, or this is just the government. Think about the reasons for this happening, okay? The lack of critical thinking in this case is just insane. It is absolutely off the scale. And I want to say well done to the wildlife carers and the law firm that took this on. You've done the right thing, and I'm glad you've had a success with it. So that was all. Okay, thanks. See ya.